Hey, today we are working on a 2004 Hyundai Santa Fe, 6-cylinder, 2-wheel drive. If I'm not mistaken, the rear is the same for 2 or 4-wheel drive. The rear drums, well, it's a drum disc combo. The drum for the parking brake, disc for the regular brakes. As you can see, these ones are toast, and we're going to do the pads at the same time. So first thing, obviously, is pull the wheel off. Up on jack stands. Wheel is going to go back underneath the car, just in case anything happens and it falls. It will fall on the wheel and not fall on, well, I'm not going to be under the car anyway, so it's not going to fall on me no matter what. So first thing we're going to have to do is, before I take the caliper off, it's always best to try and take this retaining screw off, the Phillips head retaining screw. And I'm going to be using a impact wrench, impact screwdriver. This old thing I've had for like 20 years. Nice. I did the bearings on this last time I had these off, and I greased these suckers so they would not be in there. I mean, these aren't structural. They don't hold anything. They just retain the disc while you're putting everything together, and make sure it's flush and isn't like wobbly and off center when you put the wheel back on, because you could possibly pinch it off center and have a bad day from that. So anyway, let me see if this camera's set up properly so you can see. Actually, I guess you can. Let's go move right along with this. 14 millimeter. I'm going to take off the main caliper bolts here, off the slider pins. I'm going to be doing the brake pads. I'm going to be re-greasing all the slider pins and everything. Wow, that's a really sticky, nasty bolt. I don't like the sound of that bolt. Let me get to that, making that crunchy sound. A lot of times the next step is snapping. So, well, they're both a little chunky. Well, this one's not near as bad. Well, I'm going to take these two off, so you're not going to watch me undo bolts. I'm going to waste time on that. I will be back in 1 minute when these two bolts are off. Okay, so as usual, depending on how long a caliper's been on there, how long it's been since pads are done, main caliper body could be stuck on or not. This one, apparently it's not. So before we go any further, like I said, we're doing the pads, so I'm going to compress the rotor, the piston, with the C-clamp. Push that piston back into its bore. And while that's going in, as long as it goes in smoothly, you basically know you have no leaks and no problems in there. Because if you have leaks or problems in there, then the piston's not going to push back in smoothly. And this one's going in nice and smooth. If it is a little sticky, push it all the way in, open up your C-clamp a little bit, a couple spins, go in and pump the brakes. It'll push the piston out, but it won't push it out past the C-clamp, and then crank it back in. Do it a couple of times. That will usually free them up. Even a seized caliper can be unseized that way. You don't always have to replace calipers. I'm going to try and do as much of this as I can in as few takes as possible, because video editing sucks. It just takes forever to stitch together all the different parts. I'm going to take a wire brush and clean off all this crud that's in here. and I'm going to file down the fingers of the outer arm of the caliper because they often get slightly corroded and it'll make pad insertion difficult. A lot of times it'll make them too tight if it's really corroded, and it doesn't seem to be. Don't use a crazy wire brush that'll rip the boot. This is like a soft, semi-soft wire brush. Okay. Now I'm going to hang this caliper up out of the way so it doesn't... Where am I hang it from? Let's find something up here. Alright, that's too long. Just want to hang the caliper so it isn't sitting there putting strain on the brake hose. So now on the back of the, I'll show you that. You can see them. Focus you. There's two more 14mm bolts on here. One, and then one down here on the bottom. I'm going to take those two out and be back in 2 minutes. Not going to waste your time watching that either because it's just taking two bolts out. Back in. Sorry, I almost got ahead of myself there. I was going to pop the pads out first. I mean, these pads are chunky. They just pull out. And what pad? Nothing. And we're going to take the brake springs here and soak these in gasoline, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. But now I'm just going to take these two 14mm bolts out and pull the whole caliper bracket assembly off. Back in a minute. Okay, so the main caliper mounting bracket. I pulled the two bolts off, pulled this off, and we're going to wire brush in the two grooves here on the sides where the pad springs go up against, because these again are going to get a little bit rusty, and when they get rusty they puff out and it makes pads moving back and forth tough. And we're going to grease the slider pins as well. So let me just put this down and do it. It's just it'd be a lot easier to just do it right now. Can you see that? And also just pull on the pins, hold the boot and pull on the pin. We're going to pull those out and put some brake grease in them. We'll clean them off and then put some brake grease in them because they're kind of icky. So I'm going to grease those and be back in a minute. Okay, so the two caliper pins, the slider pins, are cleaned off, and I've checked the boots on the caliper body for any holes, or cracks, or whatever. They don't have any. And I'm just going to put a little synthetic brake grease in there and pop them, pull them in and out a little bit. Yeah, there's going to be some dirty oil still in there, grease back in there. And push them in as hard as you can, and it will push that grease, like hydraulically force that grease out. And actually those boots are getting a little chunky. Or is that just mud? And that's a combination of both. Oh, it's more mud. Anyway. There we go. I'm going to pull the old rotor off. Why can't I see that? There we go. Thank God this one slipped off. And a little bit of brake cleaner to see what's going on in there. Everything's still moving. Parking brake pads aren't worn. because, where are we? This, I'm going to be putting a new rotor on, which has an inner drum for the parking brake. Now this parking brake is probably not going to fit, the drum's probably not going to fit over it. Everything here is still greased and good, so I'm not going to really screw with it. I'm going to put a little bit of brake grease up in here, which I might as well do right at the moment. There's no need to pull everything apart to grease it. That stuff will work its way down into everything. And I'm going to pull out the adjuster on the bottom to grease it, which will only take a couple of seconds because you always want to make sure the adjuster is working. Grab the spring with a pair of pliers, remove the spring. I'm going to soak this in penetrant because that spring is a little nasty. Spread the pads apart, and here's the adjuster. And that is LC'd. Not good. Nope. That is probably just this spinning end, and this is the threaded end, which is not moving. So I have to grab this in a pair of pliers, and like I said, usually another set of pliers will fit in here because it's a very wide gap, a wide, up in front of you, a really wide mouth on that. So you just put a pair of pliers in there, grab this with a pair of vice grips, and you can usually get these, work these free. So I'm going to work this one free and lube it up and be back in a minute. Okay, so I've cleaned off the brake springs just with a wire brush, then put some penetrant on them to keep them from rusting up again. Same with the retainer springs on the pads, check those to make sure they're okay. Use some penetrating fluid and stuff and cleaned out off. Peaks. Just want camera stay in place. Cleaned off the adjuster. We got that spinning again. And we're going to fill that with some synthetic brake lube. And tighten this all the way down. As I said, the new inner part of the rotor, that is, well, basically it's a drum. It's got to, it's going to be tough for it to fit. I put too much grease in there. It's going to be tough for it to fit around the pads if they're not pushed all the way in. So you've got to take this, and the adjuster pushes the pads out as you hit the brakes, and in reverse when you hit the brakes. This will slowly turn and keep the pads closer to the inside of the brake drum, the inner brake drum. And so anyway, you just have to tighten it. Not that way, that's the way it goes out, but tighten it inwards until it's tight. And then slip it back in, and we'll put that spring on. And I'll be back in a second. Okay, just before I go ahead and put the drum back on, I am going to pop the two top parts of the brake shoes apart and get some grease down under them just so nothing corrodes. And they're back on, and we hopefully center everything. Make sure there's nothing we can get on the pads. Oh, sorry. Nothing has gotten on the pads. Shoes. And spray brake cleaner just to make sure. I'm going to put the rotor back on. Make sure to line up the little locator screw hole, and of course I've got fingerprints all over this sucker again. And back in 1 minute. I'm just going to put that locator pin in, clean the rotor off, and back in a minute. Okay, little guide screws back in, and now we're just going to bolt the caliper mount back on. Let me put this camera down so you can see. That's not a fart, by the way, that's just a plastic seat I'm sitting on. Swear to God. Two 14mm bolts back in. Once I tighten those are going to get tightened down to what is it? Approximately 40 foot-pounds for these back that retain it to the caliper mount to the hub. 40 foot-pounds, give or take. 2 pounds either way. Probably 3 pounds either way, you'd be fine. Probably 5 either way, you'd be fine. But approximately 40 pounds. I'll throw the torque wrench on it just for the heck of it. Doesn't want to fit in here very well. So my human torque wrench is pretty damn accurate, if I do say so myself. So now the little spring clips, I've cleaned these off in gas. There's just a little bit of staining left on them, and they go in. Obviously the little mouth goes around the rotor. They're the same top and bottom. I don't know if this top one's going to actually stay in without a pad to hold it. It might actually stay there. Or not. Maybe. Anyway, might as well grease them first. Okay, we're going to take a little bit of synthetic brake grease again and put it on. Where are we? There we go. Put this camera down and do it in front of the camera. This is. I wish I had a cameraman, someone to just like film this for me. It'd be a lot easier. I have no friends. Okay, so just gonna grease up the tops. We're not loading them up with creeps. They're just this top where the brake pad slides in there, just so they don't get stuck and cause excessive brake wear. I'm going to stick these back on. Hopefully that'll stay. And grab our brake pads. Squealer is on the inner. Try not to touch any of the pad surface with my greasy fingers. So, sorry I'm holding this, but I don't have any other way to shoot. Oh, let me mount this camera some other way. This is a cheesy way to do it. Back in 1 second. Okay, now I can use both hands to pop these pads in. That doesn't feel right. No, it doesn't. Why is that stuck? Ah, there we go. And the outer pad. Wow, that pad is awful tight. Not liking that. And that's one of the problems with aftermarket pads. Every once in a while, they will be the tiniest bit tight or loose. Yeah, and actually, this one is a tiny bit too tight. I'm just going to file down the edges with a file and make them slide in and out of there nice. Got factory pads that have done the same before, so we can't blame it all on aftermarket pads. Anyway, I'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay, I just had to sand down the paint on the edges of the pads, because a lot of times what happens is some manufacturers just apply the paint a little bit too thick, and that thickness can mean the difference between them slipping in nicely and not. You don't want to have to bang them in there, you don't have to force them in there, you want them to be able to move back and forth freely and move away from the rotor so they don't cause uneven wear and undue wear. So now we're going to grab our main caliper body, make sure that fits over, or it's going to fit over, which it is, and we are going to put, can you see that? I'm trying to peek over the camera. A little bit of brake grease on the piston end and the outer finger end, and slide that over to push the pins back in so they can, there we go. Come on, bottom pin. Thank you. Spin. There we go. And we're going to put top caliper bolts on the main. Where's my second one? And these ones should be tightened to, what is it, about 20 foot-pounds, again, give or take a pound. Where is my wrench? I don't know where my socket wrench is, so I will just use and 20 pounds is only a little bit more than a spark plug tightening torque, so don't tighten the living crap out of them. So we're going to adjust the torque wrench. Let's see how close we got. If we can fit this in there. A lot less. There we go, that's 20. Come on, get on that bolt. There we go. And finally, brake cleaner to remove any contamination, bolt the wheel back on, and essentially we are done. And thanks for watching.